Welcome to the fourth episode of our podcast, Off the Record. Today we're talking about creativity. Dashi, how creative do you think you are?
I would describe myself definitely as a creative mess.
You've described that beautifully.
We will come back to this topic later.
Very good. I'm looking forward to it. Today we have a guest who probably stands for creativity like no other in the Siemens universe. Welcome, Tobias Eismann.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me here.
Nice to have you here. You're currently in transit from Munich to the Bernese Oberland, where the next Leading for Creativity workshop is taking place. It's great that you found the time to visit us here in Zurich. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
I would love to. First of all, I always really enjoy being here in Zurich. The people are extremely friendly, especially here at Siemens. I am Toby, and in September I've been taking care of the topic of creativity for almost 4 years. I've done a lot of research at university at the interface between neuroscience and what happens in the mind, what also happens at a human level, so to speak, i.e. psychology, personality psychology, but also what happens in a team, social psychological phenomena, and always with the question of how something new is actually created. And you don't just do this alone as an individual, but also very much as part of a team and of course embedded in an organization. It's a very complex field. It's become a bit of a passion of mine.
I Googled you. You're an engineer, founder, TEDx speaker, creativity researcher. So that fits with these brainwaves. What happens in your head? Well, I think if you were to look inside my head, you would be pretty lost, I guess. But what does a creativity researcher do?
I actually created this website and then I started this Who Am I Actually? Because I applied for a job after my research time. And that was during the pandemic. I didn't get any feedback at all. That was out of desperation. I had to choose such terms that sounded good, so to speak, perhaps to stand out a little. That's just for background. And what does a creativity researcher do? Well, creativity is a perspective on the human ability, creativity, so a very human-centered perspective with the question of how something new is created. So, of course, the classic first step is an idea. And what does a creativity researcher do who tries to understand all the data and is trying to understand how this works in the brain? But of course, I am not a neuroscientist and I don't have an MRI scanner at home to put people in. But in principle, it's about understanding this phenomenon. And it's very complex to understand it better. But of course, it doesn't stop at understanding how it works in the brain. And we know a few things, not everything yet, but we do know a few things. And this knowledge is then the claim from the brain, what actually happens there to make it usable. Just because we now know what's going on up there doesn't mean that it's of any use to us. But how do we then use this for a company, for teams, for Siemens in order to, shall I say, perhaps tease out a little more creative performance? Because we are actually all creative as human beings. The only question is, how can we perhaps use this a little more?
You say we are all creative? Then you can't not be creative?
I would say yes. I think it's very difficult not to be creative. I think we are implicitly creative very quickly, often without even thinking about it. If we're standing in front of the fridge and don't have a recipe, but still have a few leftover ingredients in the fridge and cook something from them, that's already a creative act in some way. Yes, I quickly find a new way to make a delicious recipe or a delicious dish. You have to see for yourself whether it tastes good, yes. But we are definitely creative all the time in every situation in life. In other words, without realizing it.
It always goes hand in hand with the question, are you creative? And also often in job interviews. I had my very first interview here with Array. I think you asked me the question.
What did you answer? Yes. Thanks. Next question.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I wasn't sure what I answered. I think the question was if I was creative. So how do others perceive me in terms of creativity and how do I define creative? If you ask me, when I was at school or university, I always knew how to do my work, how to find my creative path. So do I get a straight brushstroke? No, not at all. So where does creativity begin and where does it end? I think that's a multifaceted question. Perhaps another example that we often hear is, hey, you work in communication, so you must be very creative. So at the push of a button, be creative. You have to be creative, otherwise you can't work there. So it's a very, very broad term.
Exactly. Communication is the classic creative sector. People also talk about the creative industry. Then I always say, is there also a non-creative industry? Not really. Unfortunately, creativity is still often misdirected or misunderstood. Because in principle, for me, it's I would say a meta competence, which at its core actually requires understanding of how we can be creative at all. And this competence then builds on the professional skills. Of course, you need this basic competence of how does creativity work? And then you also need knowledge of communication in order to be creative within the communications industry. But in the same way, if you want to write the next AI algorithm, you also need software engineering skills. And yes, in the legal sector, you need legal skills, for example, because you need to be creative in all of these areas. The common denominator is what creativity is, and what the levers are for becoming more creative as an individual or in a team is actually always the same, of course, but also differently depending on the domain you are working in.
When I think of creativity, then I often think of the words problem space, solution space, convergence, divergence. Can you please explain these to us in more detail?
Exactly. So when we talk about creativity, we are often automatically in the solution space. We think of ideas, of solutions, of possible answers to a problem. And that's the first point. That the greatest creative output only comes about when we first explore the problem in more detail and understand more precisely what our problem actually is. Is it really what we think it is, or is there more to it? Are we solving the right problem? That is such a question. That is, the magic happens in the problem space, they always say. That's very important to know. In other words, there are these two worlds, and often we actually skip the problem space. Both spaces are relevant, and the topic of divergence and convergence is also relevant for both problem and solution spaces. We always have two different ways of thinking and working. Firstly, let's assume that we have defined the problem. We have really understood it. Okay, what do we do next? We open up the space. We work divergently. We think of 100 different solution ideas, for example, to solve this problem. That's called opening up divergently, classic brainstorming, which is one way to do it. And then, of course, I can't continue working with 100 ideas, so I have to converge again or think or work convergently, which means back to one or two ideas that I can continue working with. And this divergence-convergence issue is, of course, it doesn't just happen once. It's iterative. It's often a back and forth again and again, but is super crucial in order to really understand what exactly is happening, or that you understand that you can't diverge and converge at the same time. That's often the case in workshops where people, back to me, now I understand why this project was so stuck or just didn't go ahead, because person A wanted to diverge and person B wanted to converge, and both at the same time.
Last year, I was able to take part in the first Leading for Creativity workshop. That's why I know all these terms. For me, it was one of the best workshops I've ever attended, really, I mean that honestly. How has the format developed in the meantime? Or how have you developed the format further?
I think we have changed a lot of little things, adapted based on the feedback. I think the highlight is still the experience with the star chef. That has remained the same. I think the biggest change or development is that we are now working on a joint project. Of course, it's more difficult to exchange ideas on site when everyone has their own project. So we have now found a very good balance between everyone bringing their own projects and creating a transfer into everyday life. But we also have a joint project on site so that we can learn even more closely together. To learn even more closely together and exchange ideas. That is perhaps the biggest thing that has changed.
It's often said like, just do it, or why don't you just do it, or just do it differently. And many people assume that this means you are also creative. I would like to take a step back. Why is creativity so important? Well, you're also driving the topic forward here at Siemens. You've done so much in the last few years and months, and so much has happened during this time. Why is creativity so important?
From my perspective, we talk a lot about technologies. And that is, of course, relevant because we as Siemens are a technology company. But when I think back to my internship, I had a mentor at Audi AG, the car manufacturer. He once said, Toby, I don't know why I'm needed here because I don't actually have any technology experience. So the business administration graduate had no technology experience. And at the end of the internship, he made a statement to me. Well, actually, he threw it at my head. Let's put it that way. I didn't understand what he meant, but he said, Toby, look, we have everything. We have the smartest people with a lot of expertise, experience, and knowledge in their heads. We have technologies, a lot of them, and in the end, we have money. And when in doubt, we can put it all together to find new technologies or new solutions. So we actually have everything to build the best possible cars here at Audi AG, and yet we still fail in some places or have challenges and problems. I don't understand this. Do you know why? I said, because we are human. Because in the end, the art is to assemble the knowledge from the most diverse people's minds in order to create something new, to let it emerge and to develop the best possible new car or further develop it, whatever. So everything is actually there. And this art at the end, that's what stayed in my head. I didn't understand it at first, but it somehow worked in my head and stayed in my brain. And now I'm telling you this in the sense of, if I were to translate it, it's actually the art of creating something new, creativity, because the knowledge is there, the technologies are there, it's always going on, always improving. But how I orchestrate that, so to speak, how I bring it together to create something new, that is essential. And in my view, that is the biggest competitive advantage we have in the long term. Even if we use AI technologies now, we won't be able to differentiate ourselves because all companies will use them. And then we will all be using the same ideas from the same AI. That won't create anything special. What will differentiate our market? Well, I think it's what we can create with our own human creativity. And I think it's no coincidence that the World Economic Forum and many other studies have been proclaiming for many years that creativity is one of the most important skills. And according to the World Economic Forum, it is even the number one most important of 10 different skills. So it's not just me who is saying that. I think many more people are saying this. I think the reason why we still talk about it too little in many places at the moment is because it is so difficult to grasp. And because unfortunately science has not been around for so long that there is now one creativity book that you just take off the shelf and apply something. Instead, we are still in our infancy, even in science. So we still know frighteningly little about our brain, what actually happens there, and so on. So there is still a lot to discover, a lot to learn. But in my view, if we want to continue to be further successful as a company, in the future, it's our people. And ultimately, the ability from the information and knowledge from people's heads to create something new. And in the end, that is creativity for me. That's why it's so important.
I think that a challenge with transformation issues in general is sometimes that it's difficult to get everyone on board. You hear people say things like, I've managed without it so far and I don't have time for creativity. Oh, please, not something new again. How do we make time for creativity?
That is a misperception. We probably don't need to make time for it. We already do it anyway. We are creative every day. I think we just do it implicitly a lot. And the lever is often to simply do things more explicitly. And then sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean that you need more time, but that you might even be faster.
I don't know about you, but brainstorming sessions work best for me. When I see people in person, that can be in a very inspiring place, for example, in a beer garden in the evening. That brings us to the subject of beer. That was a bad transition, I know. You come from an area with the highest density of breweries in the world, and we're very excited to see what you've brought us.
Yes, I've brought 4 beers from my area. In fact, I grew up with a lot of beer in my youth because whenever we went hiking or for a short walk, there was a new brewery in every town where you could stop and have a beer. The Good Happendorfer. I grew up with it because I went to school with the daughter from this brewery, so I know that one very well. Because I always had it at every party when I was at school. Then it's on to the Weyerer. That's a smoked beer. We know it from Bamberg. Bamberg smoked beer is actually very famous. As a tourist, you supposedly have to try it. Everyone always finds it disgusting, because if you only drink it once, it doesn't taste good. You actually have to get used to it a bit. In other words, the locals don't like it at first either, but then it tastes good. It's a beginner's beer. Speaking of creativity, it was supposedly created because a brewing apprentice forgot to close the door by the fire where the heating used to be by the brewing kettle, so to speak. So somehow the smoke drifted over the mash. That's how it was invented. I know, it's weird, but sometimes it even tastes a bit like smoked ham. The other one is the Good Nickelbräu. I once organized a music festival when I was much younger. This brewery was founded quite recently in 2008. We always served it at the music festivals that we organized, and we did for 5 or 6 years. That was my favorite beer during those times. The other one is from Nuremberg, the Schanzenbräu Rotbier. This was my favorite beer when I lived in Nuremberg for quite a long time. It's a bit of a ride through these 4 beers from my past. It sounds like I'm quite the beer drinker now. I do like a beer from time to time. Yes, but not excessively. In fact, I was thinking to myself the other day, I think it was really pretty much about 2.5 weeks ago or even more when I had my last beer.
So I'd say it's high time. If you were given the task now to create a new beer, how would you go about it?
I would stop the project and let it go because I know I understand creativity, but I have absolutely no idea about the craft of brewing. But my great cousin is actually a master brewer. That means I would call him because I have no idea about the craft. I wouldn't be able to do it anyway.
We spoke to Thomas Frick some time ago about the topic of strengths.
Yes.
And about the strength scope. And the topic of creativity, among other things. What do we do if creativity is not one of our strengths? What can we do about it?
It's actually very often the case that a lot of people always say that I'm just not the creative type or I wasn't born creative. It's more a question of the extent to which we've either trained or not trained this through our socialization in society, the way we've grown up, educational systems. It's a bit like if we don't go running for 3 years and then suddenly want to run a marathon one day, it hurts a lot or we can't do it. Of course, we now have various formats within Siemens AG that we offer to train this. So a creativity masterclass, but also a Leading for Creativity format where we are now this week starting tomorrow at Blausee in Switzerland. But in principle, it's like this. Creativity is often understood as a creativity technique. The important thing to know is that this creativity technique is not creativity in itself, but is actually just a kind of recipe to get a person who uses this technique to behave in a certain way. In other words, creativity is obviously actually a human behavior. Anyone can train it.
In other words, you can train it and you can all support us at the Creativity Lab. Great. Where can we book you? What would that look like? In the classic way, let's say, hey, that sounds really exciting to me now. And this topic of creativity, is that me? Yes, no. How can I train it? Creativity at the touch of a button.
I think that I'm always very careful at first. There are just so many offers out there. Creativity at the touch of a button, for example. When I hear that, I'm always a bit like, That can't be true because it's just not possible. That's the pipe dream we have. But in principle, it's relevant for anyone who wants to, is allowed to, can deal with it. And in principle, just contact me or go to our website. And there you can watch videos, for example, or register directly for one of our formats, for example, our masterclass. I think that helps everyone. And the other thing is for our Swiss colleagues, managers, there is this Leading for Creativity, which doesn't have a registration link yet, but you can watch a video on the website. And I think that makes you even desire it more. But there are different formats. It's not yet the case that we've established everything, that you just go somewhere and choose what you want. But in principle, it's often the case that you just get started. A lot of teams come to me and they do a day of investing. First, the whole team on the topic of creativity. I then come along, or a colleague, and then we talk about it for a whole day to get a common understanding of this project and the goals and everything. And the team also realizes, okay, do I see potential in this or do I not see any potential? Do I want to deepen it somehow? Do I want to invest more in it or not? So this one-day workshop is often a really good starting point for many teams to find out, is it relevant for us? Yes, no.
We could talk about it for hours. There's plenty of beer too. Unfortunately, we've already reached the end. Thank you for being with us, Toby.
Thank you for letting me be there.
Have fun in the Bernese Oberland.
Yes, it's going to be great. Thank you both.
It's great that you were there. That's super cool.
We're now taking a short summer break and we'll meet again after the summer vacation. Enjoy the summer and see you soon.
Have fun. Have a great summer.
Bye-bye.